Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. We'll call the meeting of the subcommittee to order. And first thing on the agenda, if we could do a motion to approve the minutes from February 27th.
Can I just
moved.
make one correction? Under the state peer support network, written on the minutes as care support network, and just want to correct that. It's the state peer support network.
Just the spelling error, Commissioner?
The word, yeah, just the word change.
Okay. And are both of you in agreement after the spelling correction?
Yeah, so I'd move that we approve it with the amendment.
Okay.
suggested.
Uh,
Commissioner Blue.
I'll second, and then obviously we just need Honey to say yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Moving on to the next portion of the agenda, the draft plan for recertification. So I have not had a chance to review the larger packet of ideas for changes or modifications to the regulations as they exist. So I'm not gonna have that presentation today. However, we are gonna have a presentation on the portion of the Office of Mental and Physical Wellness Standards. We'll have a presentation from Elizabeth Smith and anybody else that wants to do that. But before we move to that presentation, I'd like to turn the floor over to the Executive Director on the proposal to recertify the Academy graduates. It's not a simple proposal for what's already in place. So, Mr. Director, if I could give you the floor if you want.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. Included in the packet is a memo for your consideration that comes from the Division of Certification. It specifically addresses the need to recertify individuals who started graduating back in July 1 from the Academy, back in July 1 of 2021, whose certification begins to expire, initial certification begins to expire this July 2024, given the 3-year certification. We've always had recent discussions relative to what would be the second round of certification. As commissioners will remember, the first round of certification is governed by a set of regulations. We went through that process, 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago. There was a lot of good discussion, always through the lens of the initial certification. Now that we find ourselves with the need to recertify individuals for the second time, the discussions have then become really around aspects of how the Commission is going to recertify individuals and check for instances that are required in the statute for a second or subsequent time. The proposal from the Division of Certification is to continue certifying those officers who graduated back in July 1 of 2021 and subsequently in the same manner as we have been certifying those veteran officers for the first time. The general contours of that certification is a questionnaire that everybody is very familiar with. It's a number of technical questions that they answer. They would come into our portal, answer the questions for the same officers. It just so happens that for a couple of those questions, we already know the answer because that was part of their first certification when they graduated. But we continue doing essentially what we've been doing for veteran officers A through Z. This approach would give the Commission enough time to make any changes if that is where we end up to the regulations for the recertification of officers come July 1 of 2025, which would be the date that the first big batch of officers, of veteran officers, comes due for for the second round of certification. Those are all the individuals with last names A through H. So in other words, we would continue doing what we've been doing for all officers, that we, A through H, Q through P, and I through P, and Q through C, for all those graduates that graduated between July 1, 2021 and June 30th of 2022. The second part of that proposal is that's also outlined in the memo, is to consider bringing people to a certification expiration date that co-aligns with their date of birth. We are currently on a course of having a real mismatch of certification expiration dates. When academy graduates graduate, their certification is good for 3 years, and those academy graduations are happening throughout the year. There's an academy every month or thereabouts, and the new officers that come into the system have then expiration dates that coincide with their graduation time. As per the statute, everybody that was an active officer as of July 1 of 2021, their expiration date coincides with according to their last name. And those are the big tranches that you're very familiar with: A through H, I through P, Q through C. The proposal that we are asking the Commission to consider is to extend the second round of certification to a period of 3 years plus however many months it takes for their date of birth. And we would align that with not their birth day, but their birth month, so that individuals are generally, agencies, individuals, and posts know that the certification of anybody going forward will align with the date of birth. This is similar to other licensing schemes, most notably the driver's license. Everybody remembers when their driver's license might be expiring because it coincides with the birth date. This would distribute the workload for agencies throughout the year. Certainly post would benefit from that in terms of having everybody renew their certification according to their birth month. And there are mechanisms that we can implement to make sure that people don't go over those days, so they are reminded. We could open up the portal in the future to have give people the ability to come in and pre-load information, so that expiration date does not come and find anybody without a certification. The idea would be to not shortchange anyone from a 3-year certification, and that's what I mean by when we move to this scheme, get everybody on a 3-year plus that date of birth. That would happen only once, because after that, on anybody's career, after that juncture, their certification will then be renewed every 3 years. We've had conversations about these with the MPTC. They understand that and have feedback from at least a couple of chiefs that this puts a bit of an onus on all agencies to interact throughout the year with post. But that, frankly, is something that's already happening by virtue of the academy graduates that are graduating every month, really. This would really simply uniform, or rather bring everybody to the place that we are in course to encounter in the long run. The final aspect of what's included in that memo is the notion of how we address compliance with in-service training, given this proposal. That's described in the memo. The idea would be that at any time that we conduct a recertification, that we verify compliance with in-service training for their last full training year. And that's explained in the memo. Currently, when we check for that compliance, we face certain challenges given the dates. We have a plan as described in the memo on how to address them. With that, let me pause there, commissioners, and see if there's any questions or clarifications or comments on that portion or any of that.
Either commissioner, are you all set? Or do you have questions? Yeah.
I'll say.
Sorry, go ahead, Hanya.
Oh, I understand and I'm all set with that.
Okay. Mr. Director, is this time sensitive? I know it's a proposal. Is it time sensitive that you were looking for us to take a vote on it this morning? I know July's coming quickly and with all the other things we have. Was that the intent?
Yeah, if you're comfortable voting on that, that would be great. More than anything, I was looking for no objections. If there was, the desire to make things, to implement some changes before that date, we could address them. But this is really giving us what we believe is necessary time to consider any of the changes that we might be contemplating in this subcommittee and later bring to the commission. Enough time to be implemented. Frankly, if we did nothing in terms of changes to the regulations, we would have no choice but to continue doing the certification on those officers the same way that we've been doing others. So whether it's a vote, if you're comfortable, or a no objection or consensus, it'd be great to have that.
Marcia?
Well, then I'd make a motion that we approve the proposal for recertification of the certain officers first certified by post as outlined by the executive director.
I'll second.
Yep, for this document, correct? Okay.
Yes, that just for the first, that he just outlined for the officers that were first certified by post, so that they can be more in line with the timing, and it becomes more aligned and not so confusing, but yes.
Okay, excellent. I just wanted to clarify, just in case for anybody listening, make sure
The
we're talking.
whole thing, we're gonna vote on the whole thing.
Yeah, that's what I was making a point on. Okay, yeah, I have no objection to it. So, with all three of us, Enrique, please, move forward to however you want to schedule with the rest of the commission, and move forward on whatever needs to be done to make sure that we take care of those officers. That'd be great.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Moving on to the next piece. So I won't, just to make sure everybody heard me the first time, in case we had new joiners, the discussion we're about to have is a presentation that's going to come forth on the mental health and physical wellness standard ideas. It's a presentation by Elizabeth Smith first, I believe. She's going to present some ideas that have been forwarded to the subcommittee. So go ahead, Liz, if you want to take over.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I just want to be clear, this is more of a presentation on research that I've compiled. This isn't a proposal for anything yet. I really just wanted to share information that I've received and collected on jurisdiction, psychological and physical wellness standards. So I did submit a memo on this yesterday, and this is just going to be a brief summary of that memo. So, included in the report are relevant statutory and regulatory provisions, a list of some existing officer wellness resources in Massachusetts. That's something that I would like to add eventually. Jurisdictional research, a summary of previous subcommittee meetings, some recommendations, identified challenges, and then next steps moving forward. So in my research, I've seen, or I guess first I'll start with the summary of the last subcommittee meeting. Some recommendations for addressing officers' psychological wellness included programming like peer support networks, critical incident stress management teams, and access to mental health services without prejudice, bias, or stigma. I think in order to gain support from officers and collective bargaining units, we should consider incentivizing mental and physical wellness. So nothing punitive, nothing that will put an officer's job at risk. We want to make sure that this is supporting officers, not punishing them. So some departments did say that they offer mental health time, so officers can speak with a wellness program or a clinician on staff. And some agencies give officers time during their shifts to work out and use fitness facilities in the office. So one other thing that the subcommittee should consider is how to fairly implement these standards on all agencies. We've heard that agencies vary in size and resources, so we want to make sure that smaller agencies have access to the same services and resources that larger departments have. So next, I'm just going to talk about the jurisdictional research that I have. Currently, there are 3 states that require periodic renewal of officer certification, and they are Connecticut, Minnesota, and New Jersey. All 3 states have a 3-year recertification period, so similar to Massachusetts. In terms of psychological evaluations, there are 5 states currently that require periodic psychological evaluations, and those are Connecticut, Illinois, Nevada, Maryland, and Missouri. New Jersey did introduce a bill for the upcoming legislative session calling for periodic psychological testing of officers, but that has not been passed. And I do expect other states to follow suit and introduce legislation in this area. Most of the legislation has been introduced in the past 5 years, so it seems like this is on the forefront of a lot of states' policy decisions. So we are kind of on course for that as well. So just based on my research, I have some ideas that I've pulled from other jurisdictions. First, and kind of probably the easiest to implement, is providing first responder and mental health resources on the Post website. So there are multiple states that have resources on, critical stress management, on other mental health resources available specifically for first responders. And I think that's something that we could do, more presently. And one of the comments at the last subcommittee meeting was on who would be responsible for the cost of testing. So in that, I've seen some agencies actually cover the cost of periodic testing, and others put the cost on the officers. There are some jurisdictions that actually allow the psychological testing to be conducted over like a HIPAA compliant platform virtually. So that can kind of satisfy the meeting with a clinician or certified psychologist, and do so in a more flexible manner. And potentially, with insurance, there are some states that require it be included in officers' insurance, so it doesn't actually incur a cost to them. Another idea is establishing a committee to review reports following negative psychological evaluations. Oh, sorry, did someone have a question? Or
Not
okay, sorry. So the committee allows officers the chance to appeal any decisions that they that may weigh against them. If they receive a status of not recommended for employment on their evaluation, they can come before a committee and kind of have their case heard further. I know this is something that we are shying away from just because, we don't want officers to think that this is a punitive standard, but that is something to keep in mind, that we should have something for officers to review in a way for them to be fairly evaluated. Also, there are some states that include in their regulations that the standards have no definitive pass-fail for psychological exams. So psychologist reports are sent to an agency, but the department actually has discretion to weigh it against other information that they collect, for example, from background checks, interviews, and other assessments. Enrique, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. And I don't want to disturb too much your pace, Lizzie, but I do want to just make a clarification that some of what Lizzie is getting into, these details as to other states, apply to the beginning of the certification, the initial certification of an officer, when they are not yet active, but in these other states at the beginning, at the first round of certification before entering the academy. And for reference, that we understand to be the case with a psychological and physical fitness that localities in Massachusetts conduct at that juncture. And some of the things that we are now contemplating is for veteran officers. Nonetheless, all of this is important context, as Liz is explaining.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. There are other jurisdictions that do have psychological wellness funds for officers. So, in New Hampshire, they have a psychological stability screening fund, which actually reimburses costs related to psychological screening for candidates. So again, that is something for candidates, but we could consider that for the recertification as well. Then the next thing, I know last meeting we talked a little bit about making sure we maintain confidentiality with any assessment that we have. So Missouri actually passed quite extensive legislation on critical incident stress management. And this act requires officers to meet with a program service provider once every 3 to 5 years for a mental health check-in. And the service provider is just required to notify the agency that the officer completed the check-in. So it's just we've met with this officer. And the act provides that any information disclosed by the officer is privileged and shall not be used as evidence in criminal, administrative, or civil proceedings against the officer. The act does have exceptions to this privilege if the program representative reasonably believes that disclosure is necessary to prevent harm to the officer or another person. The officer provides written consent to the disclosure of the information, or the program representative is a witness or party to a critical incident that prompted the officer to receive these critical stress services. Then next, I want to go over physical evaluations. So as with psychological evaluations, there is a lot of variation among jurisdictions. There are 3 states that require physical fitness testing periodically. In New Hampshire, they have to pass a physical fitness test every year to maintain their certification. In Texas, active officers are subject to physical fitness testing actually twice a year. So there are 2 testing periods in the fiscal year, September through November and March through May. These states do allow for retesting. So in Texas, for example, employees are allowed 3 attempts to pass the minimum standards. In Nevada, they just recently passed legislation that actually categorizes the physical fitness standards based on the duties that specific officers have. So for example, criminal investigations, enforcement of traffic laws, and other specialized areas of law enforcement. So the standards are different depending on what the officer's duties are. And in Maryland, officers are required to submit annual physical agility assessments to continue their certification. So, most of these states do have opportunities for officers to retest. So this is more of a way for officers to work up to a specific standard if they don't meet it at that time. And there is plenty of research out there that shows physical fitness is an important part of law enforcement and actually helps them be more effective in their job. Texas has a lot of information on their website on physical fitness standards. Vermont actually links to the Texas law enforcement website for their wellness and fitness page. So there's a lot of resources out there that we could take advantage of. And then just moving forward, I am working on a proposal to establish a post-commission network with peer New England states. That's something that I encountered previously when we were doing research on weapons policies for other states. I've already reached out to those states, so I have the contact information for them, and I think it would be really useful for the commission to establish a working relationship with these other similar states and get an idea of their existing regulations and just kind of get ideas from them. I think it would be a mutually beneficial relationship. So this is kind of a big overview of what I've collected, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Appreciate that. Very in-depth on both sides. I can tell you first off, before I even ask for any questions, officers have this stigma every day when they go and they meet with peer support counseling, even in their own departments. So the quicker that we can mend that and help officers feel better about seeking help for traumatic experiences, the better off policing is for the entire Commonwealth. So I'm glad for, or I should say, I'm happy for all the hard work you put into it and doing all that research. And I love the idea of incentivizing a program that would not hurt the officer at the end of the day. That's so we can't have a program that makes it punitive, and that will be the biggest concern to law enforcement as we start rolling out this idea. So thank you very much for everything that you put into it. Fellow commissioners, anything more? Hanya?
Yeah. Hi, Elizabeth, thank you so much. I think it's great to hear what other states are doing. And I think just looking at the information that you provided makes it clear that, this is really something that, states are grappling with, and there's a diversity of responses and sort of how people look at the best way to ensure that law enforcement officers are both physically and psychologically fit. I think wanted to kind of just highlight the fact that, we're looking at what other states are doing, and wanted to just point out that in Massachusetts, we're actually doing already a number of these things, and the wellness visits that are being coordinated by the Peer Support Network and the On-Site Academy basically have a model where there's a peer officer and a counselor who meet with officers individually face to face for a 1-hour wellness visit. And there's different models for how that is being paid for. But it's a really effective model because it is face to face. There's been a lot of satisfaction reported with that model, a lot of concern about ensuring the confidentiality of anything that an officer might discuss in those sessions. And it's a participation based model rather than, it's an attendance-based model rather than a participation-based model. So the officer has to attend, but has the option about whether or not to share information during those sessions. But it does sound like a lot of officers do feel comfortable sharing and get a lot of resources. And also by attending those visits, have ongoing support through the peer support network. So that's not something that we're doing across the entire state, but it's a really nice model that has worked well. So I would just encourage you to look into that, and also to find out what we're doing in Massachusetts already in terms of the psychological fitness evaluations at the onset of employment, because I think also most departments are very happy with how that's going. We have very good psychologists in the state who are culturally competent doing those evaluations. And I think that there is already a process in place for what happens if someone wants to appeal that decision and feels that the evaluator has drawn a conclusion that is unfair.
Thank you. I definitely will do research into that.
Thank you.
Masha, did you have anything or are you good?
No, I mean, generally I echo what Commissioner Bluestone said too. I think this is great information. It's not just, though, I do want to say, it's not just focused on post-critical incident wellness, though. I think we have to take this all into consideration in the general overview eventually as to how we deal with our obligation for oversight ongoing for officer wellness, because that's also going to be important, not only for the officer, but for the public. But no, I agree with everything so far. I think this was great. And it was really informative. I think this is the one part of the package I went over, but didn't have a chance to go over in as much detail as the rest. So I was glad to have that overview. Thank you, Lizzie.
Thanks, Mark. Mr. Director, I see a hand up there. Did you want to chime in here?
Yeah, just thank you, Commissioner. Just to dovetail a little bit upon some of the comments from Commissioner Bluestone on the heels of the presentation. One thing that we discussed with the MPTC and internally is that as part of this next round, or really doesn't have to be within the next round, but I think it would be a great opportunity to do so. The next round of certification, that the post commission could begin to get some real survey type information relative to what agencies are currently providing in terms of access or resources, in the area of officer wellness, that we know to be out there, but we don't know for sure that everybody is doing. And so as we conduct this, which will be a longer term type of project, in terms of trying to standardize access and resources, the very first step could really be a systemic type of survey of whether officers have access, whether they are accessing them, whether they know about the resources, to again set us up on a course for standardization.
Thank you, sir. Yep, in agreement too. Does anybody else on our screen have any questions, any comments before I ask for general public comments and questions? I don't see anything in the question answer section, but any of the general public that is on and listening, if they have a question that they want to post, would gladly take it.
Jamie, just to confirm, the Q&A portion is enabled, right, in this Zoom?
Correct. Yes. And there's nothing listed yet.
Yep. If any of the participants want to ask a question or a comment, they could just go to the Q&A portion at the bottom of the screen.
As we wait for that, so that we're not killing any more time than necessary, are there any matters that were not anticipated or on the agenda that either commissioner or somebody needs to bring forward while we're waiting on the questions? I do see one question, Mr. Director. I see that. I don't know if he's gonna have a question coming. Apologizing for signing in late. I believe that's Chief Delahunty, but if there's, let's pause for a minute in case there's a question following, if I can.
I'm not sure if it's a question. Oh, here it came.
It appears as though the question coming in for everyone is, I don't know if everybody can read it or not, but the question is about who is going to fund the requirement. And I'll open that up because I do not have the answer to that. So is there, Mr. Director, I don't know if there's an answer to that question or if that's something we need to write down and get back to him on.
Yeah, well, let me say from some of the written and oral testimony we've had in the past, this is clearly a concern locally of anything that might be deployed or required by the commission by post would have perhaps an associated cost. It's something we hear loud and clear. When we had oral testimony from the Chief Del Monte, who was representing the chiefs at the last commission meeting, that was a big portion of his. That was an important portion of his comments, saying that anything that we had to do in this regard might take away from other requirements that they have to do. I'd like to say personally that I think there's a recognition of that. There's also something that we need to reconcile with the directive of the statute as to what the statute, the law itself required. I think it's incumbent upon this commission to be cognizant to it, but you know, it's something that may be larger than us when it came to you know, that it comes from the legislation. I think, in my opinion, that leaves us with perhaps the necessity or the need to be creative, to be incremental, and to be deliberative. And that means that at a very early stages, we could at least see what resources are already available, might be free of charge. Some of that came from, you know, comments as well at the last time, because there's access to almost universal healthcare in Massachusetts. There's also access to peer support networks, and there's already you know, many agencies availing themselves of that. We've also had, lastly, I'll just say one more thing. We've had discussions with the MPTC about perhaps utilizing some of the hours that officers currently are required to spend on in-service training, about the possibility of, you know, getting some of those hours, 1, 2, however many, to give officers the option to do a wellness check, a wellness visit, or what have you, and have that count towards their in-service training. Something like that would not represent an incremental cost necessarily. Agencies already are required to deploy in-service training, about I believe 16 hours locally. The MPTC administers 24 hours of those regularly. And again, that's one of the options about thinking creatively and incrementally. Let me pause there because I see Commissioner Cataroshan has a question.
Thank you. But before I go into the next portion of Chief Delahunty's explanation, if I could go to my commissioner that has her hand up. Go ahead, Masha.
Thank you. No, I actually, as executive director continued on, I just want to say I agree with what he's saying, because we do have to be definitely cognizant of the resources for any of this, but unfortunately it's out of our control. This is not within our authority. We're not an entity that can have any control over what kind of funding there is. But I think one way to have a little control over it is to establish what we're going to decide we all may need, what the process is going to be, and that makes it and that sort of informs the ask if there is going to be a need for a request for funding from the legislature. Once we have it established here, what Post believes is important and necessary, then that paves the way for whoever may go, whatever advocacy group may go and seek funding from the legislature. But unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of control over that. We just have to deal with the process, not with on how it's funded, although we definitely, I agree, have to be cognizant of it.
Mr. Director, did you want the floor again?
Yeah, one last thing. I've heard personally in my conversations, with chiefs and presentations of the sort and others, that there's already an additional cost on implementing police reform on departments. The fact that they now need to submit complaints to us within 2 business days, that kind of thing, we recognize is a cost that may not have been there before. However little or more or large, it's something that we have little control over, as Commissioner Casarosian was saying.
Thank you both for the comments and answering the questions. Lot of work to be done on how we establish this, and it looks like from what I read in Liz's presentation package, that there may be ways that as a commission we can do that with hopefully no expenditures that are put on other communities. But it looks like there's ways that we might be able to work around it. I do want to point out that Chief Delahante's next piece in explanation was about the funding. I did take a quick copy of it, so I wrote it down for our notes for later, because I don't know if we save these question and answer periods, Mr. Director, but I did write it down. But the chief did point out that multiplying the cost just for a projected amount of offices would come in a ballpark somewhere of a little over $12 million that the communities would have to take on if it was an unfunded mandate. And I'm not going to pretend to get into the legislature's directives on mandates and how they're funded. We'll tackle that later. But the chief did put a piece in there, so I want to let the chief know that I did write all that down just to save it for later for further discussions. So. And I don't see anything other than that, Mr. Director, unless you have a different screen that I do. Okay.
I think you've addressed it, Commissioner, Mr. Chair.
Okay. At this time, then, I have nothing else to bring forward, and if my fellow commissioners have nothing else that they want to comment on, or something again that was unexpected, I think we'll accept a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Okay. And if I can hold off on a second, I should have said, I believe that this document that was presented by Elizabeth Smith, this will be available online at some point, Mr. Director, for anybody that's in the public that wants to review it.
Yes, very much. We typically post right about now the public packet that commission is considered. So we'll make that available very soon.
Okay, and I should reiterate again, if anyone has come in and joined late, it would be the subcommittee's intention to have a further public discussion on this presentation. So once it's online, please take a look, and when we have our next meeting, if this was a piece of the agenda, then we can have a full open discussion on it, especially with my fellow commissioners, and look forward to scheduling that next meeting very soon so that we can get on with the presentation for ideas on the regulations for recertification, as I know we received that packet recently from Randy and Pauline Gwen. So we'll be looking to do that very quickly. So if I can, I'm gonna hold off still on the adjournment because I see Commissioner Casarosian with their hand up. Go ahead, Marcia.
Sorry. So do we have a time frame generally that we're trying to work toward, that we're going to commit to saying we need to have something presented to the full commission on or before X date so that we can get everything done in time without having to resort back to just doing the way we've been doing it, having nothing available? So do we have, I mean, is there, maybe this is for the executive director, is there a time frame that you think is important that we meet in order to present something to present our recommendations ultimately to the full commission for vote?
Enrique?
Yeah, there's not a hard deadline, but the sooner the better. And I'm sorry to be vague, but what we're contemplating is two steps that take time. Crafting potential changes to regulations, and how we do that, could take a couple of different instances or meetings within the subcommittee. We have to bring them to the commission because they will ultimately approve them, and then they will go to a regulation promulgation process, which requires notice, a hearing, comments, a period of comments, and whatnot. I think the way we did this originally was with regulations, and to do differently would open up ourselves to criticism. I might argue, and so I think we should assume that it requires a regulation change. I don't think it'll be a lot of changes, but it's something that should be crafted in regulation, and therefore, again, the sooner the better. But given that we now have a time frame of implementation before July 1 of 2025, we have the next few months to really promulgate regulations and then communicate them and implement them, perhaps during 2025. So anything we could do in 2024, that would be great.
Thanks, Mr. Director. Before I go to Commissioner Bluestone, Marcia, if I can chime in as well, and I think more so for the general public, because I think we're all on the same page within the commission and our body that we have on the screen. But for the public, we firmly understand that it's extremely important to do our due diligence in reading all of the ideas that come forward prior to bringing it out here to this public setting and to have a discussion. So for the public, for the people that are from the public that are viewing and listening, we're going to make sure that we review everything, we bring it back here for discussion. We do have the time to do it, even though my fellow commissioner is correct that time is of the essence to make sure that we do make this happen. We're going to make sure that in light of being speedy, we want to make sure that we're thorough and we do it correctly, not just to make the date. So I'm happy that we have some time to do it. Commissioner Bluestone?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Calderon. I want to reiterate some of that. I just want to thank everybody who's put so much work and effort into this, because it really represents a tremendous amount of work by our staff and also by other interested parties who are writing in and commenting on the work that we're trying to do. And I just want to acknowledge that this is a very challenging process because we care quite a bit about the issues that are coming before us, especially the issue of officer wellness. And there's a lot of difficulty in thinking about how do we balance the available resources with the reality of the tremendous amount of stress that law enforcement officers in the Commonwealth are sometimes under in trying to do this difficult job. So just acknowledging that, and again, thank you to everybody. And I recognize that we may have differences of opinion as we go forward, but I really want everyone to know how much I personally value all the work that's going into this.
Thank you, Commissioner Bluestone. Appreciate that. And anyone else before I try to adjourn again? Sorry, I was a little premature in the adjournment call last time, but is everybody good and satisfied? Okay, so Marcia made the motion. I'll second it. Hanya, are you on board? All right, and that'll conclude today's meeting. Let me just say thank you to everybody as well, and please enjoy your day and see everybody soon.